English made easy. Hey guys! Bored of those vocab lists? Me too. At 1 Degree North Companion, we're turning wordly wise into an adventure to make learning actually interesting. Let's jump in.
You know, some ideas are so powerful, they don't just influence a generation. They actually shape entire civilizations for thousands of years. Today, we're going to explore the wisdom of one of history's greatest minds, Confucius. This was a man whose thoughts have been echoing through time for over 2 millennia. So, let's get into the incredible life and the enduring ideas of this amazing thinker.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in ancient China, but we're not starting in some grand palace. Our story begins with a boy born into a noble family that had really fallen on hard times. After his father died, a young Confucius had to work as a herder, a storekeeper, really anything just to support his widowed mom.
And this, right here, is the big question, isn't it? How does a kid from an impoverished background, facing every imaginable obstacle, go on to become one of the most influential thinkers in all of human history? Well, the answer really starts with the world he was born into. Imagine this. The world Confucius stepped into was one of constant strife, just complete social and political chaos. It was a time in Chinese history known as the Spring and Autumn period. The old ways were collapsing, the country was fractured into all these warring states. It was a mess. See, China at the time wasn't one country. It was a patchwork of states run by despotic warlords. And these weren't wise kings. They were despots, rulers who held absolute power and governed through fear. And, this isn't just some ancient idea. Think about it in a modern office. A manager with too much power can easily become a departmental despot, right? They crush creativity and rule by intimidation. So for Confucius, poverty was this massive wall, this huge impediment. He couldn't afford to go to school. But instead of letting that stop him, he just taught himself. He became this voracious reader. And later, he founded his own school, where students' lack of money was never an impediment to getting in. All you needed was a real desire to learn. As a young man, Confucius was on this quest for knowledge. He sought out wisdom wherever he could find it. And this led him to a legendary meeting with a much older and deeply respected philosopher named Lao Tzu. This one encounter would really highlight 2 totally different ways of looking at the world. And here's where it gets really interesting. Confucius was totally grounded in the secular world. He wanted to fix society, figure out government, and really define how human relationships should work. Lao Tzu, though, he was focused on spiritual matters, on the soul, the universe, and this great natural way, what he called the Tao. So because they were coming from such different places, Lao Tzu looked at this young, ambitious Confucius and found him to be, well, callow, a little immature, maybe a bit naive. From Lao Tzu's huge cosmic point of view, Confucius's obsession with creating man-made rules to fix a broken world seemed kind of small. Why try to control nature when you should be trying to understand it? And this difference is just perfectly captured in Confucius's refusal to speculate about what happens after we die. When someone asked him, he basically said, "Look, we can barely understand life, so what's the point of speculating about death?" It was practical, it was secular, and this is so relevant today, right? We spend all this time speculating about whether AI is going to take over the world, when maybe, like Confucius, we should focus on the more practical question of how we can use it to make life better right now. So Lao Tzu may have thought he was a little callow, but Confucius was determined to prove that his worldly ideas could create real change. And pretty soon, he got his chance. He was appointed Minister of Justice in his home state of Lu, which gave him the perfect opportunity to finally put his theories to the test. And in that role, he proved to be an incredibly sagacious administrator. I mean, he was wise, he showed fantastic judgment, and his policies just worked. Crime practically vanished, and a sense of order came back. It's just like today, right? A truly sagacious CEO isn't just smart. They earn trust and build a healthy company through wise, ethical decisions. At the very heart of his success was this principle of Li. Now, you could translate it as good manners or ritual, but it's so much deeper than that. It's really a system of mutual respect. It all starts with the people in power showing respect downwards to their subjects. And when leaders act with integrity, that respect naturally flows back up from the people. The result? Social harmony. The emotional core of Li is this idea: to venerate others. It's way more than just being polite. It's about holding other people in genuinely high regard. For the whole system to work, Rulers have to venerate their people, and in return, the people will venerate their rulers. It's a two-way street that has to be built on real, deep respect. But this time of peace and order, it didn't last. The ruler of Lu grew indolent. He got lazy, corrupt, and started listening to advisors who just wanted to go back to the bad old days of getting rich. An indolent leader can undo years of progress in a heartbeat. And that's exactly what happened. Confucius lost his influence and was eventually dismissed. After this huge setback at the age of 56, Confucius began a 13-year journey. He wandered all across China, trying to find another ruler, anyone who would listen to his principles. And he failed. No one would hire him. Now think about that. 13 years of rejection. That would make most people pretty cynical, right? Skeptical, bitter about the world. But Confucius, he never lost faith. He stayed true to his principles. And that, right there, might be the most powerful lesson from his life. And the long-term result of that conviction, it's just staggering. Even though he died thinking he was a failure, his ideas lived on. See, Confucius never wrote his teachings down himself. They were all compiled after he died by his followers, the students who truly venerated him. And those teachings became the bedrock of Chinese education and government for more than 2,000 years. So what were these ideas, collected in a book called The Analects? Well, they're basically principles for living a good moral life. Things like the Golden Rule, treat others as you want to be treated, the idea that strong moral character is the foundation of civilization, and the belief that who you are on the inside shows in how you act on the outside. Simple ideas, but so profound. And that brings us to a final thought for you. Let's try to apply what we've learned. Here's a challenge. Imagine you have a young, maybe a bit callow, mentee who's facing a major impediment in their career. What sagacious advice, what piece of timeless wisdom would you offer them? It's something to think about. The answers, just like the wisdom of Confucius, are truly enduring.
Hope you guys enjoyed that last lesson. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Ready for more? The next one starts right now.
What if you lived in a world without sound? I mean, really think about it. No words, no music, just silence. How would you make yourself heard? How would you share your voice? Well, for a lot of people, this isn't just some thought experiment. It's their reality. And their story, it really challenges what it even means to have a voice. So picture this, a national competition, and the theme is My Voice in America's Future. It's all about the power of the spoken word. But as it turns out, the most powerful story that year wouldn't come from a voice that spoke at all, but from one that signed. It sounds like a riddle, right? A total paradox. But that very question is the key to a story that stretches back centuries. A story about the fight not just to communicate, but for the right to have a language and a culture recognized as equal. To really get this, we've got to rewind the clock. Way back. Our story kicks off in 1815 with a young American minister, Thomas Gallaudet. He set out on this huge journey across the ocean, looking for a way to break the silence for deaf Americans. Now, when Gallaudet got to Europe, he found himself in the middle of this massive disagreement about deaf education. You had two totally different philosophies clashing. On one side, there was the oral method, which was all about teaching the deaf to speak and read lips. And on the other, the manual method, which embraced sign language. Gallaudet's trip was a real turning point. First, in England, the folks who taught the oral method were super secretive, jealously guarding their techniques. But then he went to France, and everything changed. He was welcomed into this amazing community that was all about the manual method. He knew, right then and there, this was it. This was what he had to bring back to the US and propagate. And to propagate, to really foster the spread of this new idea, it meant so much more than just starting a school. It meant planting the seeds for what would eventually grow into American Sign Language, and with it, an entire new culture. And for a while, those seeds really flourished. It kicked off what looked like a golden age for deaf communication in America. But that big debate Gallaudet ran into in Europe, it didn't just go away. It was simmering, and it was about to boil over on a global scale. So for a good while, ASL was on the rise. It really achieved what you'd call ascendancy in American deaf education. Schools were popping up, a deaf culture was forming, but this progress was met with this incredibly vociferous debate from people who were convinced it was a huge mistake. And this ascendancy, this period of real influence and domination, it was so important. It proved that a visual language could empower a whole community. Kind of like how a new tech company can gain ascendancy in the market today and completely change the way we live. And believe me, that debate was vociferous. I mean, it was loud, it was passionate, it was personal. The supporters of the oral method were absolutely relentless, arguing that signing cut off the deaf from the hearing world. The irony is, this fight over silence was anything but quiet. And then this happened, a truly devastating blow. At a major conference in Milan, a group of hearing educators, driven by this really dogmatic belief in their own method, voted to basically banish sign language from schools everywhere. A dark age for deaf education had just begun. This dogmatic approach, sticking to your beliefs so rigidly no matter the evidence, was a catastrophe. This decision wasn't based on what was actually best for deaf kids. It was a philosophy forced on them that left countless students without any real way to communicate. It effectively silenced them for 100 years. So for over a century, the fallout from that Milan conference just crushed sign language education. But then a high school student decided it was time to make her voice heard, but on her own terms. And this is Shannon Merriman. She was deaf, she used American Sign Language, and she wanted to compete in a national oratory contest. Yeah, a competition all about the art of public speaking. So when the organizers told her no, she couldn't enter, she didn't just walk away, she challenged them. And her challenge, it went right to the heart of what oratory even is. It made everybody stop and ask a really basic question. Does a voice have to be spoken to be heard? And you won't believe this part. The theme of the contest that year couldn't have been more perfect, more apropos. It was My Voice in America's Future. I mean, come on! Here was this young woman fighting for her right to express her vision for the future, using the exact language that had been shoved into the shadows for a century. You see, a huge part of that historic bias against ASL was this dogmatic belief that it was just some rudimentary, basic set of gestures. That could not be more wrong. Modern linguistics has proven that ASL is a rich, complex language. It has its own grammar, totally separate from English. It has regional dialects, just like spoken languages. It even has its own incredible forms of poetry. So what about that alternative they pushed so hard for so long? Lip reading? Well, get this. Here's a mind-blowing fact. Even the absolute best lip readers can only perceive about 30% of spoken English just by watching someone's mouth. Just let that sink in. The other 70% has to be guessed from context. Think about it. Words like mat, bat, and pat look exactly the same on the lips. It is a constant, exhausting mental puzzle, just trying to piece a conversation together. So to properly assess the two methods, you have to see the whole picture. Lip reading isn't some simple one-to-one substitute for hearing. It's a continuous, high-stakes process of analyzing incomplete data and trying to fill in these massive gaps. And all of this, the history, the linguistics, the struggle, it all comes together right here in Shannon Merriman's story. Her fight forced everyone to look at this issue and ask a really fundamental question. And in the end, the sponsors had to give in. They reversed their decision and Shannon got to compete. Her victory wasn't really about winning a prize. It was about kicking open a door that had been slammed shut for a century. Her actions came to embody the spirit of this whole fight for communication rights. And to embody that fight meant she became a living symbol. Her courage proved that a voice isn't just about sound waves coming out of your mouth. It's about the fundamental human right to share your thoughts, your ideas, and your dreams with the world, in your own language. So, I'll leave you with this to think about. If you had to impart, or, communicate, your most important, deeply held belief, but you couldn't speak a single word, how would you do it? And when you assess your strategy, do you think it would truly embody the full passion and meaning of your voice?
Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one.